Hollywood is a dream factory, but not every dream is worth living. Behind the glitz, stars often find themselves trapped in roles they despised, forced by contracts, power games, or sheer bad luck. Ever wonder what it's like to play a part you can't stand while millions are watching? From Golden Age legends under studio lock to modern icons stuck in billion-dollar franchises, the stories may shock you or sound eerily familiar. Bette Davis, parachute jumper, 1933. Imagine being one of the most talented actresses of your generation, yet stuck in a movie so dreadful you can barely watch yourself on screen. That was Bette Davis in Parachute Jumper. Davis had signed with Warner Brothers, and under the old studio system, actors were little more than property. Refuse a role, risk suspension, argue, get blacklisted. So when she was handed this limp crime comedy about aviation hijinks, she had no choice but to comply. Davis later called the film unwatchable and admitted she hated every minute of it. The character was flimsy, the dialogue laughable, and the whole experience was an insult to her talent. But the studio didn't care. They churned out pictures like a factory line, and Davis was just another cog. Ironically, this humiliation gave Davis the fuel to fight harder for quality roles. She took Warner Brothers to task, demanding scripts that matched her ability, and eventually won, paving the way for powerhouse performances in Of Human Bondage and Jezebel. But Parachute Jumper remained a bitter reminder that even the fiercest stars had to swallow garbage when the studio ordered it. The lesson? Stardom doesn't always mean choice. Sometimes it just means gritting your teeth through cinematic torture. Olivia de Havilland, Devotion, 1946. Olivia de Havilland is remembered as a trailblazer, but before she broke free, she endured roles she detested. One glaring example is Devotion, a melodrama about the Bronte sisters. Sounds promising, right? Wrong. Warner Brothers forced de Havilland into the part while she was already battling the studio in court over unfair contracts. She didn't want it, didn't believe in it, but the studio had the power. The film itself dragged through production hell, sitting on the shelf for years before release. By the time it hit theaters in 1946, de Havilland had already won her lawsuit, shattering the studio's iron grip on actors. This was the legendary de Havilland decision that set the precedent, freeing countless actors from oppressive contracts. But Devotion symbolized the ugliness of the old system. De Havilland, a woman of immense skill, was essentially punished by being shoved into a role she found beneath her. Watching it today, you can feel her disinterest bleeding through the screen. Yet her defiance turned that sour experience into something greater. The foundation of Hollywood labor freedom. De Havilland showed that you could fight the system and win, even if it meant slogging through a movie you despised on the way. Marlon Brando, Mutiny on the Bounty, 1962. Marlon Brando was Hollywood royalty by the early 60s, but even royalty can be chained. MGM practically strong-armed him into Mutiny on the Bounty, a bloated remake of a classic tale. Brando wanted a challenging role, but what he got was endless location headaches, studio meddling, and a part he loathed. Brando reportedly sabotaged the production himself, showing up late, rewriting scenes, and driving the crew insane. The shoot ballooned into one of the most expensive disasters of its era. His disdain for the role was so obvious that critics at the time could sense he was barely trying. The film nearly ruined his career. His reputation tanked, and Brando became branded as difficult, the kiss of death in Hollywood. But in true Brando fashion, he didn't care. He later said the entire experience made him question why he acted at all. In a twisted way, the film's failure solidified Brando's legend as a rebel. He wasn't afraid to burn bridges or call out the nonsense of studio control. Mutiny on the Bounty may have been a cinematic shipwreck, but it exposed just how powerless even the biggest stars could be when a studio pulled the strings. Christopher Plummer, The Sound of Music, 1965. You'd think starring in one of the most beloved musicals ever made would be a career high, right? Wrong, at least for Christopher Plummer. Cast as Captain Von Trapp in The Sound of Music, Plummer hated every moment. He thought the script was sugary nonsense and nicknamed the project The Sound of Mucus. What made it worse was the image it forced on him. Plummer was a classically trained actor, craving meaty roles, but Sound of Music turned him into a stiff, singing father figure. He later admitted he drowned his frustration in alcohol during the shoot. To him, it wasn't art, it was torture. And yet, fate had the last laugh. The film became a worldwide sensation, cementing itself as a cultural treasure. Plummer's disdain didn't matter. Audiences adored him. He spent decades trying to distance himself from it, but eventually softened, realizing that millions had grown up loving his work, even if he hated it. In the end, Plummer learned what many actors discovered too late. The role you despise might be the one the world never forgets. Faye Dunaway, Mommy Dearest, 1981. Few performances crash harder than Faye Dunaway's turn in Mommy Dearest. Cast as Joan Crawford, Dunaway was pushed by her agent and the studio, despite her gut screaming, no. The result? A role she loathed, one that critics ripped apart and audiences mocked. Dunaway delivered an over-the-top performance that became camp legend, but she hated it. She later said the role ruined her career and locked her into an image she never escaped. The irony? The movie was intended to be a serious biopic, but ended up a cult. Midnight special, with audiences laughing at lines meant to be terrifying. Behind the scenes, Dunaway felt manipulated into playing Crawford, a choice she later regretted bitterly. Unlike Davis or de Havilland, she didn't turn the failure into a triumph. Instead, Mommy Dearest became a scar she never shook off. It's proof that sometimes the role you hate doesn't just haunt you, it defines you, for better or worse. Harrison Ford, Blade Runner, 1981. Harrison Ford may have played one of the most iconic characters in sci-fi history, but don't let the neon lights and rain fool you. He hated making Blade Runner. Ford was coming off Raiders of the Lost Ark and wanted another hit, but instead he landed in a world of tension. He clashed endlessly with director Ridley Scott, who was obsessed with visuals over character. Ford wanted Deckard to feel like a real person. Scott treated him more like a prop. The worst blow came after filming. Warner Brothers had decided the movie needed a dumbed-down narration to explain the story. Ford thought it was a terrible idea, but was forced to record the lines anyway. His delivery was famously flat, as if he was intentionally trying to sabotage it. When asked about it years later, Ford admitted he didn't even try to make it good because he hated the concept so much. Ironically, the version audiences love today, the director's cut, strips out that narration. Suddenly, Blade Runner became a classic, and Ford's performance was celebrated. But for him, the damage had already been done. The shoot was miserable, the relationship with Scott icy, and the role one he never wanted to revisit. The lesson? Even sci-fi masterpieces can feel like prisons when you're the one trapped inside them. Sylvester Stallone, Stop, or My Mom Will Shoot 1962. Picture this: Sylvester Stallone, the tough guy of Rocky and Rambo, stuck in a buddy comedy with Estelle Getty playing his mom. How did this happen? Simple, Arnold Schwarzenegger tricked him. Arnold pretended to be interested in the role, knowing Stallone's ego wouldn't let him pass it up. Sure enough, Stallone jumped at it, thinking he was stealing a hit away from his rival. Big mistake. The movie was a disaster. The script was corny, the humor painful, and Stallone was clearly uncomfortable the whole time. He later called it maybe the worst film in the entire solar system. That's not exactly a glowing endorsement. Audiences agreed, and the film tanked, leaving Stallone embarrassed and stuck with the consequences. What makes this worse is that Stallone didn't even want to do comedy at the time. He was forced into it by pride and a bit of studio pressure. He thought he was being clever, but instead he ended up humiliated. To this day, Stop, or My Mom Will Shoot, sits at the bottom of his resume, a constant reminder that sometimes the role you hate finds you when you're trying too hard to win. Val Kilmer, Batman. Forever, 1995. Being Batman sounds like every actor's dream, until you ask Val Kilmer. Cast in Batman Forever, Kilmer quickly realized the Batsuit was pure torture. It was stiff, suffocating, and so restrictive he couldn't even hear the other actors. Conversations on set felt like miming through glass. Add in a script that leaned toward camp and a director, Joel Schumacher, who clashed with his style, and Kilmer was miserable. He later said playing Batman was like being trapped inside a rubber coffin. The role gave him no room to act, no real emotional depth, and no chance to show the intensity he was known for in films like The Doors or Heat. It was all about the suit, the look, and the merchandising. Kilmer hated every second. After just one movie, he quit. Schumacher claimed Kilmer was difficult, but the truth was simpler. Kilmer despised being reduced to a mannequin in a cape. Fans might have wanted him to return, but Kilmer had no interest in continuing. It's proof that sometimes the most glamorous role in Hollywood is also the most suffocating. David Cross, Alvin and the Chipmunks, 2007 to 2015. Now here's a bizarre case. David Cross, the sharp, sarcastic comedian from Arrested Development, found himself locked into one of the most sugar-coated franchises in history, Alvin and the Chipmunks. At first he agreed because the paycheck was good and it seemed like harmless fun. But then the sequels came, and came, and came. Cross hated every second of it. He called the films contractual jail and mocked them openly during press tours. By the third movie, he wasn't even pretending. He told interviewers he was only there because Fox had forced him under contract. At one point, he joked that promoting the movie felt like being in a hostage video. Fans were shocked at how blunt he was, but Cross didn't care. The movies made millions, but for him, they were embarrassing detours that had nothing to do with the kind of comedy he wanted to create. It's a reminder that contracts can be chains, and sometimes even a seasoned comedian can't joke his way out of them. Channing Tatum, G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra, 2009. Channing Tatum became a star with Step Up and Dear John. But behind the scenes, he was stuck in a deal he couldn't escape. Paramount forced him into G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra, because of a 3-picture contract he had signed early in his career. Tatum hated the script. He hated the role. He didn't even want to be in an action toy commercial disguised as a film. In interviews, he admitted flat out, "I was pushed into doing that movie." His lack of enthusiasm was visible on screen, and critics roasted his wooden performance. The film was a box office hit, but for Tatum, it felt like artistic betrayal. The kicker? He begged the studio to kill his character off in the sequel, and they did, right at the beginning. That's how badly he wanted out. Tatum's story is the classic Hollywood trap. Young actors sign contracts thinking they'll lead to opportunities, only to realize later they've sold years of their careers to roles they never wanted. Edward Norton, The Incredible Hulk, 2008. Edward Norton is known for being meticulous, sometimes to a fault. When Marvel hired him for The Incredible Hulk, he thought he was signing up for a chance to reinvent the character with a darker, more serious story. Norton personally rewrote the script, adding layers of psychology and tragedy to Bruce Banner. But when Marvel saw his cut, they panicked. They wanted action, not introspection. The studio forced a re-edit, chopping out much of Norton's vision. Worse, they ordered him to keep quiet and promote the film as if he supported the changes. Norton resisted, skipped some of the press, and made it clear he hated the final product. Marvel responded by quietly cutting ties. By the time the Avengers rolled around, Mark Ruffalo was wearing the green suit. Norton's Hulk remains an oddity, neither loved nor entirely forgotten. But for him, it was a nightmare of being muzzled, overruled, and stripped of creative control. To this day, he rarely mentions it, proof that sometimes even A-listers can't fight the machine.